We are getting into Indiana, Miami. Early look. We're not going to do any predictions or anything like that, but just early look at this game. We talked about this a little bit, but I think we have more context now after watching Indiana play here against Oregon. Another blowout for Indiana. I am just going to say right off the bat, I am not going to be surprised at all if Indiana blows out Miami again. However, I do think that Miami possesses some of the things that could make this a closer game. I think some of the things that Miami has to do to make this a closer game, it's really old school football kind of stuff. They got to be able to run the ball. They got to stop Indiana from running the ball, and they can't turn the ball over. And I think Miami is set up pretty well for that kind of stuff. Now, was not super good with that last game. There were some plays that Miami made that could have been turnovers that Ole Miss did not always capitalize on, but still, Miami played well last game. They were able to stop the run out of one big run by Kawan Lacey, and they were able to run the ball pretty well, but they do get away from it a little bit early. So, Zach, what are your thoughts on those three things, and do you have anything else that you would add to that list?
Yeah, well, and I think with all those things in conjunction with getting ahead early, right? Because if you look at the recipe that Miami, I think the recipe for a Miami win is very similar to what they did to Ohio State, right? Indiana, Ohio State are similar in this regard. Like Indiana wants to possess the ball. They want to drive down the field, hit you over the top, but really they like ball control, efficiency, and that's a lot of how Ohio State was put together this year. So what Miami needs to do is they need to control the clock, not turn it over. If they can find a way to put enough pressure on Mendoza for him to, have the rare turnover and get up 2 scores, I think that's where Miami could have a real shot in this game. Here's the problem with that. Indiana doesn't make mistakes. And so they don't do what Ohio State did in the Cotton Bowl. They hold on to the ball. They don't throw pick sixes. And so I think if you're Miami and you're like, we've got to find a way to get plus in the turnover margin, I'm not sure you can depend on that. But I think it has to be, to your point, old school. You got to find a way to get a couple of explosives from Tony. You got to find another option. I know they found the one receiver. It wasn't Daniels. It was the other guy that made some big plays for them in that matchup against Ole Miss.
Trader?
No, not Trader. Who am I thinking of?
No, I'm blanking on it too. That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm going to look at it. Marion. Marion had 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown against Ole Miss. So I think the other thing that I would just warn Indiana fans of is if you're sitting there and you're like, well, Miami kind of stunk against Ole Miss. Ole Miss isn't that good. We're going to blow Miami out by 30. I think it's certainly a possible outcome. I think you're going to get the A game from Miami. Like, again, Cristobal's MO, he plays down 2 teams. Case in point, SMU and Louisville. And they play up against the best teams on their schedule. They're going to see that number 1 by Indiana, and he's going to have them rise to the occasion, I think. So that to me signals I think this is going to be a great game. Like is my thought. I think this will be. Now, again, I thought Indiana Oregon was going to be I picked an 18-point win, but I thought it would be good for 3 quarters. I was wrong about that. So, but I think Miami will give Indiana a better game at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to what John is saying here. John, appreciate you being here. He says the real question for Miami is Carson Beck is he going to play flawless against a daunting Hoosier defense? And I think that's like the biggest thing that you would hope that Carson Beck would be able to do with his age and his maturity and stuff like that, going up against a team that's going to put pressure on him. I know this Miami offensive line is really good, but this Indiana team has confused every single offensive line that has seen them this season. And I don't think Miami is the best offensive line in the country. I'm not saying that they're not top 5. I'm not saying that they're not top 10, but I'm just saying they're not like impenetrable, that you can't get pressure on them. And I think that Carson Beck has shown this season that he is not at his best when he gets pressure, when pressure gets on him. Now, he's done a really good job of utilizing his legs these past couple of games. So Indiana is going to have to allocate resources to making sure that on 3rd and long and those type of situations, Carson Beck doesn't get the first down with his legs. But I think that Indiana is going to really cook up some interesting stuff in this game to get some nice pressure on Carson Beck. I think they're going to utilize Isaiah Jones in some nice ways, even with Stephen Daly out. I mean, Landino, Mikel Kamara, like what they've been able to do, moving that defensive line around to continue to get pressure. Like, to me, it just solidifies, a lot of these people talk about, well, Indiana's players, their older players are going to be gone next year. And it's like, well, their coordinators aren't going to be. And their coordinators have been fantastic. I think you see more spectacular plays from like skill set and talent from the Indiana offense than you do from the defense of Indiana. And I'm not taking away anything from Indiana by saying that. I'm saying that Brian Haynes cooks up an amazing scheme to be able to get pressure on the quarterback and also get coverage sacks on the quarterback as well. I mean, Brian Haynes is just a phenomenal defensive coordinator. He's a mastermind out there. And Carson Beck, he's seen it all. He's an older quarterback. What is he? 5th year, I think he is. So, if anybody can do it, it's him. But I don't know if I trust Carson Beck to be able to do that. He's had a really good offseason so far. If he is going to do it, this will need to be his Mona Lisa. This will need to be the game that kind of caps off his career. Is like, people doubted me, but I can still make it happen. We'll see if it does.
Yeah, and I think again, I think this game comes down to, can Miami elevate? And if they do, can they get Indiana kind of in an uncomfortable position like they did Ohio State? But I would,
like, with the defensive line and stuff.
Yeah, well, not just that, but like getting up multiple scores, forcing them to not just be able to do whatever they want on offense. And part of that is you like taking away the run game either by the score or by up front. But I think I'm with you. As good as the lines are for Miami and for Miami, and I think they're darn good. Like, I would argue top 5 in the country, maybe even top 3 on both sides. I would argue that Oregon's top 3 or top 5. And I think they have dynamic pass rushers. Not as good as Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain is legit stud. But so is
Mesidor too.
Yeah, Mesidor. Although Mesidor was hurt in the second half of that Ole Miss game. So, and that's the other thing. Miami's defensive backs were banged up in the second half. You have Lucas, who has a big targeting call that he'll be out for the first half of that game. So you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, because I still think Miami has enough talent to make this interesting. So, don't go picking blowouts, Indiana fans. I know you're excited, but there is, I would argue that going into this, there is an advantage for Indiana. I know last night I said I think the line is too high at 5.5. It's 7.5 now. I've reconsidered that. I think Indiana, I think that 7.5 is probably good, if not a little low.
Yeah, FanDuel, you got Indiana favored in this one by 7.5. At least that was the look ahead line. If you're listening to this later on, people might be betting it after the game is over, and it might be changing. But as we speak here right now, it is 7.5 on FanDuel. Man, like, I hear you, and I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. It just feels like this Indiana team, anybody they go up against, like, the Patriots back in the day when they had Matt Patricia there and everything, it felt like every single game plan in the playoffs was tailor-made to give them exactly what they needed against the other team. Now, they weren't blowing teams out because it's the it's the NFL, but this Indiana team seems to have an answer for everything that the other team throws at them. So whether it's Ruben Bain, whether it's Mesidor, whatever Miami is going to throw at Indiana, it just feels like they're going to have an answer for it. And as much as, Carson Beck has hurt teams a little bit with his legs this offseason, Fernando Mendoza does it too. And Fernando Mendoza is masterful with his legs. It's not just QB draw, the ability to get out and scramble, recognize when yards are there, and be able to go get it. I'm really, really looking forward to see what this Indiana offensive line looks like against this pass rush of Miami, because I do think that Indiana is so good at getting early yardage to set themselves up. They're going to be able to get into tempo. I don't think it's going to be like Ohio State, where Ohio State kind of struggled to get into their tempo. Yeah. And Indiana was running some tempo in this game. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, we know what Indiana's doing here. They're kind of running some tempo, getting a little bit of practice into it, because I do think that they're going to recognize if they can get that defensive line of Miami tired and keep those guys out there, it's going to be very beneficial for them, not only to be able to have Fernando Mendoza drop back, but also to be able to run the ball very well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's well said.
So I think the key for Miami will be to hold off that run game, because you have to hold off the run game on first and second down. You have to put Indiana in 3rd and 5 or worse. And the run game is going to be a huge part of that. So, all right. Any final thoughts on this, Zach?
No, I think that we probably should talk about this on Sunday. But I think there is something to be said just about the way, like, this moment in time for Indiana. Like, I know we've been saying it's the greatest coaching job, but there needs to probably be more said about just how remarkable this run is. They have beaten Alabama and Oregon by a combined score of 94-25. That's insane. So can I ask one other question? Because I heard this on the broadcast, and maybe this is a Sunday topic, but Indiana's blowing Oregon out. Sean McDonough, and Greg McElroy, great broadcast team, but they brought up, who's feeling a little bit better about themselves now is Alabama. I disagree with that, because I thought Oregon was bad because Dante Moore played a bad game. Alabama just stinks. And I don't want to hear that narrative. Alabama did not belong on the field. Oregon had a bad night. And I think it's absolutely clear to me that this was bad Oregon, not I don't belong on the field Alabama.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to get to the SEC here in just a moment. You guys are doing a fantastic job in the chat. And I do want to kind of give you guys some recognition there, because I really appreciate you guys. And sometimes with this quicker format, we don't always get to utilize the chat as much as we'd like to. So I want to go ahead and give a few shout outs to you guys really fast. Fight on Natty says, JR, the Miami's left tackle is a liability. He's really slow off the line. And my thing with that is, like, it's not like Oregon pass rushers where, like, you just speed off the line over them and you get their leverage on one side. A lot of it's scheming. I mean, obviously Indiana's pass rushers can do that, but so much of it is just kind of scheming to, get over that stuff. So Joe says Beck will throw a couple picks, maybe. I think he probably will, but he's also been better in the postseason. So I feel like I got to give Beck some credit where credit is due. He's been much better utilizing his legs and stuff like that. But I'll tell you what, if he does throw a couple picks, it'll be over for Miami if that happens.
Miami cannot turn the ball over if they want a shot in this game.
No, yeah, I agree. James says Hicks versus convicts. That rhymes. There you go. Good one, James. He says, I like it. Go IU. Making sure I'm not missing anything. And PSU, Jim says, the SEC, another year with no representatives in the Natty. You are correct, PSU, Jim, and we're going to get to that here in just a moment.